Are your hips or lower back feeling super stiff by the end of the day? Are you finding it much more difficult to get down onto the ground, or maybe to have to hop back up? Hello, my name's Shell from Seashell Massage, and I've got some super handy tips for you. Common contributors for low back pain or stiff hips are your hip flexors, hamstrings, glutes, or QLs. Your QLs are awesome postural muscles. They attach at the bottom of the ribs down into the top of your pelvis. This is the ribs and the pelvis, by the way, if you're having trouble with my drawings. And then they're also attaching along to the lumbar spine as they're going down. They can get tight if you're sitting for long periods of time. Your hip flexors have 5 key muscles. Looks a little bit like a dog's breakfast. But basically what you need to know is they are responsible for flexion of the hip. So that looks like pulling the hip up. Looks similar to when you're sitting in a chair, right? So if they're sitting in that constant shortened state, it's easy to see how having a chair posture can affect your hip flexors. Tight hip flexors can also pull your pelvis anteriorly forward. So if you think about that belly out, butt out kind of posture, a lot of people have it where anterior pelvic tilt basically, which then means it's super jammy for the lower back, just because that forward rotation is then like adding a little bit of like, there's less room in the back of your body. The hamstrings are made up of 3 muscles. They can be responsible for hip extension, but more importantly, knee flexion. So they are, if you're looking at my very basic drawing, attaching in the at the pelvic girdle, but also down at or below the knee. So then when they're contracting, it's creating this movement of the leg where you've got a decreased angle in the back of the knee. If they're tight, they can be responsible for a posterior tilt, where the pelvic girdle, sorry, just this arm's getting in the way, pelvic girdle's coming down. If you think about people who have like almost like a sleeping bum, or when you're trying to sit and you can never quite sit straight on your sit bones. So these are your sits bones. Every time you sit, it's like this curling effect when you're trying to have your legs out straight, and you can't quite work out why you can't touch your toes or sit up straight. These things, these circular things, when you think of sitting, that's what you're wanting to be sitting on, with a nice straight back if you can. And then lastly, you've got your glutes. Your glutes are, my super detailed drawing, your glutes are what make the essence of your butt mass, basically. If you're sitting for long periods of time, your glutes can get quite lazy. They're not working. It's their job to help with walking and standing and postural stuff. But if you're not doing any of that and you're just being a blob, they've got nothing to do, so they can just slack off. They don't really need to be there or engage or work, which then causes problems when you do want to do those activities, because you then have to try and wake them up a little bit. When you're sitting in a chair for long periods of time, whether it's for driving, studying, doing office work, watching telly, or other things, it can mean that your hip flexors and hamstrings are sitting in a shortened state, which is then causing structural problems and mobility issues. No, I can't change how much time I'm spending working or driving. It's all good. I've got some hacks for you. While you're watching telly or sitting and reading or even studying, try to pop yourself down onto the floor for as long as possible. Check here for a video on how to sit on the floor while studying or doing office work. This may only be bearable for about 30 seconds, depending on how bad things have gotten. You may find you need a cushion or bolster or little stool, depending on what you've got floating around the house, that you need to sit on for a little bit of extra help to help ease your way down to the floor as a bit of a stepping stone. And then once you've hit that max amount of time of like, oh goodness, it's not comfortable anymore, you can reward yourself by popping back up onto your chair of choice. And if you're doing this every time you go to sit on the couch for that activity, you'll gradually be able to get longer and longer, and it will no longer feel as uncomfortable. I've started being able to sit on the floor for longer, but then it gets uncomfortable. What's the best position to be sitting in? The best posture is the next one. So mix up how you're doing. If it starts getting uncomfortable sitting in one position, play around with crossing your legs, having your legs straight out in front of you, having them out wide, having one leg bent, one leg out straight, sitting on your legs. Try to get as creative as possible and just find different ways that are comfortable. At the same time, you're opening up your hips, you're moving, you're not being sedentary, and you're increasing your natural mobility and flexibility. I don't know about this whole sitting on the ground thing. My GP told me that I'm not allowed to ever squat again, and that my knees are cooked and all the cartilage is worn out in my knees, and I've got lower back injuries going on. If you're worried, you can always check with your GP or physio about whether sitting on the floor or certain positions will be better or worse for you. The experience that I've had with the people that I'm looking after is their knee, hip, or lower back pain tends to start improving once they're on the floor more. My squats have been feeling so much better.